More than 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans. Humans have explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. The remaining 95% is not empty. It is alive. It has its own rules, its own logic, and its own timescale. It needs no sunlight, no oxygen, and none of the conditions you believe life depends on. It has been operating this way for billions of years, long before you appeared, long after you disappear. Here are 10 real, scientifically documented deep-sea phenomena that lie beyond the boundaries of human everyday understanding. Starting with number 10, there are lakes on the ocean floor. Within the ocean lies another ocean. If you dive deep into the Gulf of Mexico, descending hundreds of meters below the surface, you'll witness something that defies intuition. There are lakes on the ocean floor. This is not a metaphor. It is not a description of geological similarities. It is a lake in the literal sense, with shores, a surface, water, sandy beaches, and even ripples that slowly undulate across the surface like waves. The water in this lake and the seawater surrounding it are both liquid water, but they do not mix. The reason lies in density. These structures, known as brine pools, have a salinity several times that of ordinary seawater, and their density is high enough to form a distinct interface with the surrounding seawater. The two bodies of liquid water coexist in the same space, separated by a boundary visible to the naked eye, like a thin membrane or a mirror. If a fish swims into this lake, it will not continue swimming. There is almost no oxygen inside the brine pools, and the salinity is high enough to cause the fish's gills to lose their regulatory function within seconds. Most fish that swim into the brine pools quickly lose the ability to move shortly after entering and sink to the bottom. Footage captured by a submersible shows that the edges of the brine pool are sometimes littered with large numbers of fish carcasses floating near the shoreline as if drawn there by some irresistible force. Yet the lake's shores are not devoid of life. At the boundary of the brine pool, on the edge of that extreme chemical environment, a complete ecosystem exists. Microorganisms thrive within the chemical gradient, and the organisms that feed on them gather near the boundary, forming a community that depends entirely on the boundary itself for survival. This ecosystem is neither within the lake nor outside it, but exists at the lake's edge. There is a whole realm of life on Earth whose logic of survival is to inhabit the extremely narrow gap between two incompatible environments. Number 9. It's snowing in the deep sea, but this snow will fall for 100 years. The entire deep-sea food chain is built upon a slow-motion descent. In the ocean's surface layer where sunlight reaches, phytoplankton perform photosynthesis, zooplankton feed, and fish hunt. This world is easy to understand. Its logic is fundamentally no different from that of terrestrial ecosystems. But once the light fades, in that eternal darkness, thousands of meters below the surface, what sustains life? The answer is snow. Marine biologists call it marine snow. It consists of organic debris from the upper ocean, dead plankton, excrement, fragmented organic matter, and bacterial aggregates. This debris begins at the ocean's surface and sinks downward at an extremely slow pace. How slow is that? It takes about 1 to 2 weeks for a single particle to travel from the surface to the seafloor at a depth of 4,000 meters. But in deeper regions, depending on ocean currents and particle size, the average sinking time can reach several months, and under certain conditions even approach 100 years. This means that the organic matter slowly descending to the deep sea floor right now may be the remains of organisms that died 100 years ago. The foundation of the deep sea food chain is a century-long slow-motion snowfall. And this snowfall is changing. As the climate warms, the structure of productivity in the upper ocean is shifting, causing both the quantity and composition of marine snow reaching the deep sea to change. This implies that in a few decades, the foundational supply of the deep sea food chain will be radically different from what it is today. The deep sea ecosystem will, completely unaware, face a change originating from 100 years in the future. It cannot foresee it, cannot adapt to it, and can only wait as the nature of that snow quietly changes. Number 8. An octopus that waited for 4.5 years in the darkness, 4,500 meters below the surface. This is the longest known incubation record among both vertebrates and invertebrates. In 2007, researchers discovered a female octopus in the deep-sea region near Monterey Bay, California. It belonged to a deep-sea species previously rarely documented in research. Small in size and pale in color, it clung to a crevice in a rock. It was guarding a cluster of eggs. The researchers decided to continue tracking this octopus. They regularly sent submersibles back to the same location to record its condition. In the first month, it was there. In the 6th month, it was there. In the first year, it was there. In the second year, it was there. It never left that rock. The submersible's records show that throughout the entire incubation period, the octopus showed no signs of feeding. Food is scarce in the deep sea to begin with, and it did not exhibit any active foraging behavior. It simply remained there, gently stirring the water above the eggs with its tentacles to maintain the oxygen supply. In the fourth year, researchers noticed that its physical condition began to deteriorate significantly. Its color grew paler, its skin showed signs of damage, and its mobility declined. In the 4.5 year, the eggs hatched. When the researchers returned, the octopus was gone. In the darkness and extreme cold of the ocean floor, 4,500 meters deep, it had guarded the eggs for over 1,600 days without eating or drinking. Scientists calculated the difference between the energy it expended and the energy it consumed during the incubation period, concluding that it had exhausted all its reserves necessary for survival before the eggs hatched. It lived until the moment the eggs hatched, and then died. This is the longest incubation period ever recorded for any animal, without exception. Its existence defies any rational explanation from a physiological standpoint. It lived far longer than it should have, due to some reason we cannot fully describe within our current framework. Number 7. Whale fall. The death of a single whale can sustain an entire ecosystem for 100 years. When a whale dies, its carcass begins to sink. The rate of descent depends on the whale's size and depth, but for large cetaceans reaching the deep-sea floor typically takes several days. During this process, sharks and other large scavengers follow and feed on the carcass, but the low temperatures and high pressure of the deep sea cause decomposition to occur at a much slower rate than in shallow waters. When the whale's carcass finally reaches the seafloor, a distinct ecosystem begins to form. Scientists call this process a whale fall. In the first stage, mobile scavengers arrive and consume the whale's soft tissues over a period of months to years. Blind eels, sleeper sharks, and polychaete worms gather from the surrounding darkness, numbering in the tens of thousands. In the second stage, opportunistic species take over the skeleton, and crustaceans establish colonies on the bone surface, feeding on residual organic matter for several years. The third stage, which is also the longest, is known as the chemoautotrophic stage. Whale bones are rich in lipids. Anaerobic bacteria penetrate the bone interior, breaking down these lipids and producing hydrogen sulfide. Sulfoxidizing bacteria use hydrogen sulfide as an energy source for chemosynthesis, forming the foundation of the food chain, and attracting other organisms to settle. During this stage, the skeleton of a single large whale can sustain a complete chemosynthetic ecosystem for decades, and in some documented cases for over a century. The ecological resources provided by a single whale's death are equivalent to the organic matter deposited in the surrounding normal seafloor environment over thousands of years. While analyzing whalefall ecosystems, researchers discovered an additional detail. Certain species found in whale falls are exclusive to these sites and deep-sea hydrothermal vents, with no recorded presence in any other marine environments. This discovery leads to the inference that these species may rely on whale falls as a stepping stone to migrate and disperse between distant hydrothermal vents, with whale falls serving as their only available way station. If this inference holds true, then whale migration routes, in a sense, also determine the geographic distribution of deep-sea ecosystems. A whale's entire life, and the place it chooses to die, is shaping the pattern of life thousands of meters below the surface. Number 6. The deep sea is making sounds, but no one knows what they are. Signals captured by hydrophones persist even after all known sources have been ruled out. During the Cold War, the US Navy deployed a network of underwater acoustic monitoring stations on the seafloor across the world's oceans, initially to track Soviet submarines. This system captures far more than just the sounds of submarines. Low-frequency sound waves travel extremely efficiently through water. The sound of a deep-sea earthquake can be clearly received thousands of kilometers away. The calls of whales, the breaking of icebergs, and the activity of undersea volcanoes. These signals make up the ceaseless soundscape of the deep sea. While processing this data, researchers discovered some signals that could not be classified. The most famous of these, recorded in 1997, was dubbed the bloop by researchers. This signal had an extremely low frequency and immense intensity, strong enough to be simultaneously detected by multiple monitoring stations more than 5,000 kilometers apart. It lasted for about a minute before vanishing. No identical signal has been detected since. Analysts ruled out known geological sources. It did not match the characteristics of seismic signals, did not match the acoustic signatures of volcanic activity, and was not on the same order of magnitude as the vocal frequencies and intensities of any known marine animals. In 2005, the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reanalyzed the signal and proposed a new explanation. It may have originated from massive fractures and movements in Antarctic glaciers, with the ice generating unique low-frequency vibrations as it shifted. This explanation was accepted by some researchers, but not all. The controversy lies in the fact that certain characteristics of the signal differ from the known acoustic signatures of glacial activity, and no evidence fully corresponding to the scale of ice movement required to produce the signal was found in satellite imagery from that time. The origin of the bloop has yet to be fully confirmed. It simply existed. Once, somewhere in the deep waters of the South Pacific, its intensity was strong enough to travel halfway around the globe, and then it fell completely silent. Beyond it, there are other unclassified deep-sea signals, each given its own name, still awaiting explanation. The ocean has a history of sound recordings far longer than that of humanity. We have heard a fraction of it, but there is no way to confirm whether what we have heard is the most significant part. Number 5. The deep sea is an archive of Earth's history, but no one has full access to it. Atmospheric samples from 2 million years ago, sealed in mud layers 4,000 meters deep. Sediments on the deep sea floor accumulate at an extremely slow rate. In some areas, the deposition rate is approximately 1 to 2 centimeters per millennium. This means that the material at the bottom of a sediment core drilled from the seafloor may have been deposited millions of years ago. Each layer of sediment preserves information about the Earth at the time of its formation. Bubbles dissolved in seawater become trapped within sediment particles, preserving the chemical composition of the atmosphere at that time. The skeletons of dead microorganisms record the ocean's temperature and chemical environment at the time. Isotope ratios reflect the volume of global ice sheets, and chemical compositions reveal the patterns of ocean currents. By analyzing deep-sea sediment cores, researchers have reconstructed a detailed history of Earth's climate change over the past millions of years, with a precision far surpassing that of any other geological record method. This is the most complete physical archive of Earth's history that humanity has been able to access to date. However, this archive has a fundamental limitation. Deep-sea sediments are not evenly distributed, and records are missing in some areas due to erosion by ocean currents. Drilling technology has limited depth capabilities, and obtaining complete continuous cores spanning long time periods is technically extremely difficult. For certain key historical periods, the corresponding sedimentary layers are either incompletely preserved or have not yet been sampled. The more fundamental problem is that we can only interpret the portion that has already been discovered and sampled. Deep-sea sediments cover the vast majority of the Earth's seafloor, yet the proportion that has been systematically sampled and analysed to date is extremely limited. The Earth has inscribed its complete history in layers of mud 4,000 meters deep. What we have read so far is merely a few pages of that story. Number 4. A layer of water in the ocean is losing oxygen. It spans the globe, is inaccessible to fish, and is expanding. At intermediate depths in the ocean, roughly between 200 and 1,000 meters, there exists a distinct layer of water. Researchers call it the Oxygen Minimum Zone, or OMZ for short. The formation of this layer has natural causes. The ocean's surface layer is continuously replenished with oxygen through contact with the atmosphere and photosynthesis, while deep seawater also receives a certain amount of oxygenated water through slow global ocean currents. However, at this intermediate depth, far from the surface's oxygen supply, and lacking the renewal brought by deep water circulation, organic matter is broken down by bacteria, consuming oxygen at a rate that exceeds the rate of replenishment. As a result, dissolved oxygen levels in this layer are extremely low, approaching zero in some areas. Most fish cannot survive in this layer, which acts as an invisible barrier separating the upper and lower ecosystems. This is a natural phenomenon that has existed for millions of years. What concerns researchers is the change that is taking place. Ocean monitoring data from the past few decades shows that the global ocean's lowest oxygen layer is expanding in size and range, with oxygen concentrations continuing to decline. This is linked to rising sea temperatures. The warmer the water, the lower its capacity to dissolve oxygen, while microbial activity increases, accelerating oxygen consumption. The expansion of the oxygen-depleted layer is squeezing the living space available to fish. For species that rely on migrating between different depths to complete their life cycles, this invisible barrier is becoming thicker and harder to cross. This process shows no obvious surface signs, no visible pollution, and no direct visual evidence. It quietly expands in the darkness hundreds of meters below the surface, redefining the boundaries of marine life at a pace that is almost imperceptible year by year. Number 3. Deep-sea microorganisms are regulating the Earth's entire carbon cycle. They have existed for billions of years and are currently determining the composition of the atmosphere. Vast microbial communities thrive on the deep-sea floor and within deep-sea sediments. Their living environment is so extreme it defies description. No sunlight, no oxygen, temperatures near freezing, pressures hundreds of times greater than at the surface, and sometimes high concentrations of toxic chemicals. Their metabolic rates are extremely slow. It is estimated that certain microorganisms in deep-sea sediments undergo cell division only once every few hundred or even a few thousand years, yet their numbers are on a scale that is hard to fathom. Scientists estimate that the total biomass of microorganisms in the deep sea and seafloor sediments is equivalent to, or may even exceed, that of all terrestrial plants on Earth. Their collective activity drives several chemical cycles that affect the entire planet. They capture carbon, fixing and sequestering organic matter, which would otherwise be released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide within deep-sea sediments. The amount of carbon removed from the atmosphere annually through this process is a substantial multiple of global annual human emissions. They consume methane, breaking it down before it escapes from the seafloor sediments into the water column. Methane is a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide. Without the consumption by these microorganisms, a large-scale release of methane stored on the seafloor would have a dramatic impact on the atmosphere. These processes did not begin recently. They have been operating for billions of years without human intervention, maintaining the chemical stability of Earth's atmosphere long before humans appeared. The entire existence of human civilization is built upon this stability, yet no one has ever taught you this, nor is there any obligation for these microorganisms to continue their work. They simply carry on, deep in the darkness thousands of meters below your feet, silently and continuously regulating the composition of the air you breathe. Number 2. Life near hydrothermal vents may require a rewriting of the definition of life. Their metabolic pathways differ from those of all other known life on Earth. In 1977, the submersible Alvin descended to the seafloor near the Galapagos Islands and discovered the first deep-sea hydrothermal vent. Surrounding the vent, in an environment where no traditional biological framework would predict the existence of life, thrived a dense biological community. Giant tube worms, clusters of clams, and swarms of shrimp and crabs. This discovery alone overturned the fundamental assumption that life requires sunlight. But an even deeper upheaval came from subsequent research on these organisms and the microorganisms on which they depend. Near the hydrothermal vents, scientists successively discovered a class of microorganisms whose metabolic pathways differ fundamentally from those of all other known life on Earth, including the most extreme extremophiles. Almost all known life forms on Earth, whether relying on photosynthesis or chemosynthesis, share a common set of molecular mechanisms for their core biochemical reactions, use the same genetic code, and depend on the same fundamental chemical reactions. This shared foundation is the core basis for scientist inference that all life on Earth originated from a single ancestor. However, the enzyme systems and reaction pathways involved in the metabolism of certain microorganisms found near hydrothermal vents deviate significantly from this standard framework. The extent of these deviations has led some researchers to propose a cautious hypothesis. These life forms may represent an independent, previously unknown pathway of life's origin. If this hypothesis holds true, it implies that there may be more than one tree of life on Earth. The tree of life we are familiar with, rooted in a common ancestor, may be merely one branch of Earth's biological history, while another branch has long existed in the darkness, thousands of meters below the surface, coexisting parallel to us, only to be observed for the first time in 1977. This hypothesis remains controversial. The evidence is still incomplete, and the conclusion has not yet been widely accepted, but it has not been ruled out. Number 1. The deep sea destroys evidence. This means we will never know what once happened in the deep sea. In the deep sea, pressure is a fundamental force. For every 10 meters descended below the surface, the pressure increases by approximately 1 atmosphere. At a depth of 4,000 meters, the pressure is about 400 atmospheres, equivalent to a weight of over 400 kilograms per square centimeter. At the deepest point in the ocean, the bottom of the Mariana Trench at approximately 11,000 meters, the pressure exceeds 1,000 atmospheres. Under this pressure, the behavior of most materials is completely different from what we experience on the surface. Metal containers not specifically designed for deep-sea use would be crushed during descent. Wooden materials would be completely compressed. Gases would be compressed into liquids. And human tissue would lose its structural integrity in a very short time. The degradation process of organic matter in the deep sea is entirely different from that on land or in shallow waters. Under the combined effects of extremely high pressure and extremely low temperature, the decomposition of organic matter proceeds at an extremely slow rate. However, when decomposition does occur, the products diffuse and disappear in ways never observed in shallow water environments. This raises a fundamental epistemological question. Under specific conditions, the physical conditions of the deep sea can obliterate evidence of past existence in a manner approaching completeness. A wooden ship sinking into the deep sea, given sufficient time and pressure, can vanish without leaving almost any recognizable wreckage. When an organic object enters the deep sea, its degradation products disperse to the point where their origin cannot be traced. Even certain inorganic substances, under the specific chemical conditions of the deep sea, undergo dissolution and transformation that would not occur under surface conditions. This means that the deep sea is not merely a space we have yet to explore. It is a space that actively erases its own history. We cannot know what happened, what existed, what appeared, or what vanished in the deep sea during the hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of years before humans began systematically exploring it, because the evidence of what has vanished has already been obliterated. The deep sea we see today is its present state, not its history. Everywhere else, we have ways to trace history, even if it is incomplete. Stratigraphic records, fossils, ice cores, and the chemical composition of rocks. To some extent, these media preserve traces of what once existed. Deep-sea sediments preserve some chemical records, but they cannot preserve physical objects. The deep sea is the only place on Earth where things that once existed can vanish without leaving a trace. This is not a rhetorical statement about the mystery of the deep sea. It is a physical fact regarding the preservation of evidence. What this means is that our understanding of the deep sea has a blind spot that can never be filled, not because we haven't explored it yet, but because what once existed there can no longer be recovered. The deep sea is not merely unknown, it is permanently in part unknowable. These 10 phenomena are all scientifically documented, supported by research literature, and are actually occurring. They are not anomalies. They are integral parts of the deep sea functioning as it should. What is unsettling is not the existence of these phenomena, but what they signify, that on this planet there exists a world almost entirely parallel to our own, with its own ecosystem, its own chemical cycles, its own timescales, and its own sounds. It has existed for billions of years. It does not need us, nor does it wait for us to understand it. And in the 5% we have explored, we have already discovered enough to overturn multiple fundamental assumptions. We do not know what lies within the remaining 95%. The only thing we can be certain of is this: it is not empty. Thank you for reading to the end.